Welcome to the OtherWorldsGG Community Cast. This is episode number 57. I am Table for Two, and I am joined by Mellified and Alien Pickle. What's up, dudes?
Hey, did you know? Did you know you can now pre-order our next episode?
That's right.
In advance.
Really?
Yes, for the low fee of no dollars.
Well, it's not just wish listing it.
You'll get it when it comes out.
Right. Well, yeah, you just have to subscribe to the feed.
No special perks. Just
well, I figured since we were gonna talk about the
So today
wish list.
Today we're gonna talk about pre-orders. We're gonna try to get to maybe some Switch and Steam Deck news. Or not necessarily news, but chat later if we've got time. But, you know, in this digital age that we've come to, the idea of like a pre-order would be to like reserve your physical copy, say from like Walmart or GameStop or wherever you were getting physical copy of games from, and it would, it'd ensure that you got this, right? Like they would put your name down on the list and it would ensure that your copy came in. And then when you got it, like when it came in, then you would pay whatever the remaining fee was. Like, GameStop notoriously was like $5 to put down on a game or whatever it was. And then like when it came in, they would apply that $5 to your purchase and you just pay the rest of the balance and off on your merry way. That is traditionally how I've bought most of my collector's editions of games that used to come out, before you could just buy them online or order them online as part of some pre-order thing. They would just ship it right to you. I used to go to GameStop and get, special editions of, enter game name here, to get it. I think as the years gone on, I've gotten special editions of games through, an online purchase from, said game's website, right? Like that's where I think, a lot of times I would get them. But like I remember getting Diablo 3, the original Diablo 3 special edition from GameStop. I pre-ordered it from GameStop to ensure to get the physical, box. But we're in this kind of weird digital world now where you can still quote pre-order something, and you'll oftentimes you can get like maybe a pre-order bonus where you get like some piece of content or some piece of cosmetic blah as part of the pre-order. But what does the pre-order actually do in a digital world other than maybe give you perks? Like, where's the advantage to the pre-order? Like, is it to pad the numbers of people's interests? That's the thing that I just don't fully understand at this point. Now, if it was for a lot of exclusive content or some kind of exclusive thing, that'd be one thing, but so many times I've seen pre-orders where you get the pre-order stuff and then like later you can buy the pre-order stuff if you didn't get in on it. Or they offer it as some kind of like a DLC later, or they come out with like the Ultimate Edition. It's got all that stuff in there and it's just like, well then what was the point of me pre-ordering this beforehand?
You got it for free. I mean, you didn't pay $5 or whatever.
Sure. I mean, I suppose that's true. Because that also comes with the territory. Pre-orders are also, I almost want to say they're maybe the same side or the other side of the same coin as like day one DLC. It's kind of like, well, what was the point of that? Like if this is coming out the same day as the game's released, then why didn't I just get this with the game? You know, but clearly you were working on it all at the same time. And when I download and install it, I have all these assets here. They're just not unlocked to me, but I mean, like, what do you think?
Well, I want to go back to something you were talking about earlier with the physical discs and collector's editions and stuff. I got really burned and got really upset when I would pre-order stuff at GameStop, right? And they would get a limited number of whatever tchotchke collectible, thing for a game. So they might have 20 pre-orders of that, but the store only gets 5 of the whatever, and it's first come, first serve. Except the employees, there was a faceplate back in the 360 days before they did the Slim, the Red Ring one, the Xbox had a faceplate that was removable and you could put on different ones.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember so clearly, I don't remember the game, but I remember that the pre-order bonus was a faceplate. And there were 5 of them that were unique. So there were 5 different faceplates. You would randomly get one when you pre. And I went into my GameStop having pre-ordered the game. I went in first thing in the morning, I had my lunch break, I think it was. And they're like, oh, well, the first guy who came in wanted them all, gave him all 5. We only got one of each, and he wanted them, so we gave them. What the actual F? Like, are you kidding me? I pre-ordered, and you guys gave away the bonus that I was supposed to get? And I was just done with GameStop, with pre-ordering. I mean, I could go on a rant here about GameStop. I'm not a fan, but
yeah,
that at that point was when I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. I will just buy the stuff from Amazon and have it show up at my doorstep. And even if I don't get it on day one, because they, at that time, Amazon wasn't always getting it there, the first day. I was just like, I forget it. It's not worth it. And so that's when I stopped.
I was out with stuff where it's like, oh, pre-order the game from here and you get this character, but if you pre-order it from the other store, you get a different character.
Yeah, I was never a fan of that kind of stuff too, and it always seemed to be the console stuff that suffered that more than anything, because the PC versions of things were always modding that shit back in anyway. But like, yeah, I think I got done with GameStop at 1.2 when it was just like, it was getting more and more ridiculous. I think what was really bothering me was when they became more focused on what was current on the console realm. They used to do pre-orders a lot of PC stuff, but depending on where you were, some GameStops didn't even deal with PC stuff or sell PC stuff. And that's where, the majority of what I was interested in was more on PC. Because I remember when I was in high school, I had built up quite the console collection, and I decided that I was done with consoles for a little while, so I went to a GameStop and took all of my consoles and traded it in for store credit, and was able to buy like tons of PC games. And this was back in like 2005, by the way. So this was when GameStop was still doing okay in my opinion. But like, that in-store credit was what I was able to then pad my PC collection of stuff pretty well, because they were still dealing with big box PC games. And we're talking like the big box PC games too, before they started like downsizing them to like those little DVD sized boxes or whatever that they had. And so, that's how I got Star Trek Armada 1 and 2. That's how I got like some of my Elite Force stuff. That's how I got, a bunch of different games, because they had them on the store shelf at the time. But, with pre-ordering, I think pre-ordering today needs to take kind of like a re-evaluation process and really make it like more enticing for people. There's some stuff that I might pre-order where I've got enough information, I've got enough interest, I've got enough like know-how that I'll pre-order some digital copy just because I'm curious about maybe some exclusive content that they might have, or maybe I can pre-order it because I'm going to get a discount on it. I think, is it Green Man Gaming is pretty notorious with putting out discounts of new games as they first come out, so you can buy the game at like 5% off or something like that. You save yourself a few bucks.
Yeah, I'd like to know how they do some of those deals, man, because like some of those games day one they're doing like 15-20% off, and it's like, huh. But the person selling the game, like, they don't put it for that on Steam. But if you go to Green Man specifically, they get that deal.
Well, and I'll tell you, so 2 things. One, Humble Bundle, if you subscribe to Humble Choice, you get 20% off almost everything in their store, period. Like, everything. Whether, if it's already on sale, you still get 20% off the sale price. So that's why I keep my Humble Choice subscription, beyond just the value of the games I get every, like the discount. But specifically what you're talking about goes back to something we actually talked about on our last show, which is Steam refund. Because now if you buy it on Steam day one at full price and you decide you don't like it and you return it, it actually costs the developer money.
But if you buy it at Green Man, then you can't
There's no
return it.
refund. Right.
Yeah, so they're giving you the can't refund it incentive.
Yep. So it's like a hotel. A lot of hotels thing where if you prepay no refund, it's a much cheaper price than if you do a normal reservation, and it's kind of the same deal with PC games. And it's, there are certainly times where I've purchased something from a third party reseller and wished I could have returned, right? But I saved 20% on that game by not doing that. And the developer still made 10% more than if I had refunded, right? Because they would have lost 30% to Steam for the refund penalty.
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting position to be in with those kinds of things. I just think that so let's actually talk about this. So I recently got a Switch, and one of the things that I noticed right away going online and looking at the eShop and stuff like that is every first party title from Nintendo is $60. Every one of them. And I was like, this game's already been out for like 5 years, still $60.
Right, like if Nintendo put out Bejeweled, it would be $60.
No. Like if we're talking about first party.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If they made a game that was as simplistic as Bejeweled, it would still be a $60 game.
I mean, well, probably because looking through there, because anything that's not from Nintendo was like much lower prices. So like all these like third party games, they were at much lower prices than Nintendo stuff. But like we're talking about like Mario Odyssey, still $60. You're looking at the complete like Breath of the Wild with the DLC is like $80, but if you just get Breath of the Wild, still $60. I mean,
I'm pretty sure Nintendo did Captain Toad Treasure Tracker at 40, not 60. That was one of their rare
and that's okay.
Price
and
titles.
And that's fair, but I mean, we're talking about like most of their first party games are like, I mean, any of their Mario games, the Rabbids and Mario crossover game, still $60. Mario Kart, still $60. Like
the difference, the Mario v. Rabbids go on super discount. Like I've seen it 80% off.
And I wasn't saying that they don't go on discount. I'm just saying.
But the Nintendo stuff, even on discount, is like still 40. The most that they will discount it is 33%.
Right. It's really strange to go in and see these games that are like this expensive in their exclusive store. And I think, it's funny that like, they say that, console makers don't make money off the console, they make them off the games. And I was like, Nintendo sure as hell is living up to that name for sure. Like there's no doubt there, but cause like I've jumped on, I don't think I have bought a physical copy of a game for my Xbox One X. I don't even think I own, I'll have to look into my inventory, but I think, I can't think of a game that I own that is specifically exclusive to like the Xbox One, maybe Halo 5. But that's like the digital version of Halo 5. I have because of you, Mellified, you gifted me 3 physical copies of 3 different games there. Those are the only physical PlayStation 4 games that I own. And I own 1 physical Nintendo Switch game. So, so much stuff has gone into this digital era. So the point I was trying to get at is Nintendo is selling these games digitally for $60. You can also go and buy the physical game for $60. So my question then becomes, what's the difference? Like, I get the physical copy. I can probably like, trade around with like my friends or family members, but like.
So the digital copy comes with the DRM that is Nintendo's version of what's PlayStation and Xbox have had for a while now. which is you have a home console, and anyone playing on your home console can play anything that you've purchased digitally.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can be on a second Switch, signed into your account, and play anything you've bought digitally on your account.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially, when you buy a digital copy, you're getting 2 copies. Now, Microsoft and Sony do not do any validation of what you are playing, so you can play the same game twice at the same time, including multiplayer against each other with one purchase, which is a big deal if you have somebody else that you're playing with. Nintendo does an online check. So what you have to do is on the home console, put it in offline mode, and then you can play any of the single player stuff, and it won't go check in with Nintendo servers. But like if we were game sharing, or you and your wife were game sharing, right? And you had Mario Odyssey, and you both wanted to play, if you were both online, it would actually pop up on her screen if you purchased it and say, sorry, you can't play this right now.
Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah, well, and so ultimately, Nintendo has essentially driven down the value of the digital. It used to be you were getting 2 for the price of 1 in a sense, versus the physical, where it was a thing you had to hand to somebody if they wanted to play it, and so there was only really 1 copy that you have active at a time. And so Nintendo's tried to make the digital stuff behave the same way as the physical.
Well, and I guess for what it's worth, with the physical stuff, there's a chance that you could probably get it for cheaper depending on what's going on. Like you might be able to find a physical copy at a garage sale. You could probably find a physical copy at a store that's on some huge sale in the store.
A lot of times, though, again, you will not see it below $40 for those first-party titles, even on sale at a physical store.
Yeah, that is just wild to me. And I guess that's what I'm getting at, is just there used to be, the advantage of buying physical was you got extra perks, you got extra things. There was maybe a game manual or something. But when they're still selling physical stuff that costs the same price as the digital, and you're not really getting anything, there's no added value. That's when I begin to question what's the point. What's the point of some of the physical media stuff?
Because I will point out that some of that physical media stuff, when you get the game, you put the cartridge in, and there's no game on it. It goes, and there's a code in the box that you go put in, and you download the game. The cartridge is effectively just copy protection.
Right.
That's or it's got a very God. There was one of the games that had one game on the cart, but it was a trilogy. Oh, it was the Nintendo All-Stars. Only one of those games, if I remember correctly, was actually on the cartridge. The other 2 you had to download.
Yeah, the other interesting thing with that is with my PlayStation. So now that I've got this PS4, I've got three physical disc games that I'm installing locally on the machine, but I still have to have the disc in the machine in order to play it. And I was like, what is this, 1998? This feels installing games, off a disc onto a PC, except for I can't use some no CD hack.
Yeah. In the 360 era, right? It was playing off the disc. So sure, that made sense. And it was a feature late in the 360's life where you could copy the disc to your hard drive. You still had to have the disc in, but it would run it off the hard drive for better performance. Right. And then that became the standard with the Xbox One and PS4. You had to install it to the hard drive because the CDs were so slow, or the DVDs were so slow. They wanted to bump up the minimum performance. But yeah, I mean, it's crazy. The disc is just copy protection at that point.
Yeah.
Which is, it's a thing. The other thing I was going to say, with the physical Switch cartridge, you do get the cartridge, which is very tasty if you put it on your tongue.
Oh yeah, that'll whatever. Yeah, that was such a goofy situation, but
that just got Jessica Chobot right out.
But no, it's fun. It's fun being able to now kind of be in this market, because you know, for the longest time, I used to be a really diverse gamer across the board with Nintendo and Sony and Microsoft. Well, I guess for the longest time, I was primarily like a Nintendo, Microsoft PC kind of person. I really never delved into the PlayStation market when it was live. Like I always like I got a PS1 and a PS2 way after the era of the PS1 and PS2 were done. I never owned a PS3. I've never physically had a PS3 in my possession. I think I've only ever seen or touched a PS3 once. And then, you know, I've just recently picked up a PS4, and that's also not even like a PS4 Pro. So I mean, like I'm definitely in like a few generations removed from what's current with PlayStation, but it's fun being back into like all three of the categories again and kind of seeing how they handle things. The pre-order situation though is still just goofy to me, and I miss the days of the physical stuff, because when you used to buy, even before like collector's editions, like back in the mid 90s there, when you would buy games, they were, or even late 80s or early 90s, mid 90s, you buy games, they came with stuff. You were getting diagrams and posters and manuals that had like bits of lore in them that you could read, and you know, all kinds of stuff. And then it kind of started shifting to where you started getting more of that stuff only in like a collector's edition. So you paid like an extra like 10 to $20, and you got the collector's edition that had all this extra goodies and fun stuff in it. And slowly but surely it became like digital collector's editions where you get like digital versions of a thing, or like the digital art book or the soundtrack or the whatever. You know, I've got so many soundtracks on Steam, but I've never like touched them.
Yeah,
and I forget.
Same.
You know, I forget that it's there. Like, I forget that I have all this music, and it's not like it's bad music. It's just like I forget that I have that because it's digital, and it's just not something that I'm used to.
I just have no real interest in it most of the time, so I would rather it not. I don't pay for extra for it generally. It sometimes comes with like a deluxe edition that has some extra, you know, in-game actual game content. So I'll end up with them occasionally. But yeah, the soundtracks. That would be something like if I pre-ordered, I got the soundtrack for free. That might be interesting. But as it is, having worked for a publisher who made a lot of money made up their living off of Steam, really, any DLC that you can add and then bundle helps your ongoing revenue stream, because people will look at, hey, you just released a new DLC for my game, but I can get the complete your set bundle for a 20% discount. And that includes the soundtrack. I don't really want the soundtrack, but by bundling it, it's a psychological trick to get people to pay the extra money for something they don't actually want.
Right.
So at any rate, it's interesting. Like I feel like the soundtrack on Steam is a bit of a scam, considering it's in the game that I already. And if I were motivated, I could go into the game files and rip the soundtrack out myself.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's true. And I kind of wonder, like, it made me want to ask you. So you run a home Plex server. You've got your backed up movies and TV shows on your Plex server and your music on there. And I was actually going to ask you, have you ever thought about taking any of your digital soundtracks for games and putting them on that as like a central?
I have. The problem is Plex very heavily relies on its back-end database of media. So it has a database of every TV show, every episode of every TV show. It has a database of every movie. And I say every, right? Air quotes, right? They try. And music is the same thing. It tries to match any music you put in there against its database, so it can cover art and liner notes equivalent. If you remember old albums, they would have liner notes about the band, about the album. It tries to pull in all that stuff. Well, it doesn't know anything about any of the. So you put a game soundtrack in there, and sure, it'll put the files in there, but they're not even named properly a lot of times or whatever. So it's a lot of manual effort to go in and curate that correctly, if that makes sense.
That does make sense, and that's also strange that that's the case. I'm actually a little surprised to hear that, to be honest with you.
I tried a few different times to put stuff in there, and it had no idea what I was doing, fortunately.
So looking into my Steam right now, I've actually got 47 soundtracks in here. I didn't even realize I had this many. And looking through, I've actually got like Stellaris' soundtrack. And while I've always kind of bitched and complained about Stellaris, I will say the music of Stellaris is really good. So that's an interesting thing. That's something that I find fascinating. That like if I'm actually someone who enjoys
game music.
I find myself listening to WoW's soundtracks, for example. I've been playing Tunic a lot lately, and I found their whole. I guess they put out their whole soundtrack for free on YouTube. And so I've been listening to that soundtrack because the music, the game Tunic is a vibe unto itself, and the music is just really it like kind of puts me in the right mindset, I guess. But like when I'm trying to focus on stuff, it's just kind of nice background music to have. So I've always been a fan of like game soundtracks. I think Sea of Thieves has a pretty decent game soundtrack, but that's a hard one to get a hold of because there's not like an official like soundtrack for it. At least not that I've seen. EVE Online's notoriously had like a lot of really good music. I think anybody who's ever played EVE, as soon as you hear Below the Asteroids, it's just like you immediately know what that is. It's like pretty like you hear that and you're like, oh, that's EVE, like without a doubt.
Yeah. Well, good music should do that. It should be distinctive. It should draw you in. It should emote the game and the world that you're going into.
The other thing I know we've kind of turned this topic a little bit into music. The other thing that I appreciate about sometimes with game music is like you have these artists who kind of take traditional like game music and then like lo-fi or hip hop-ify it. And the menu music for the Wii, for example, I think is a pretty notorious one that I've remembered hearing people take and kind of like put a beat to it, and you're like, oh, this is actually really interesting. So pre-orders, I feel like if pre-orders are to exist, they really need to exist in the light of offering something that is really of value. Something not necessarily physically tangible, but like tangible enough.
Well, I think a discount, right? 10% seems like a good discount day one, or as a pre-order bonus. Give me, a $3, $5 DLC pack of some cosmetics or something fun to kind of get me started. Those are the things that usually get me. I will also pre-order those sometimes because I know I'm going to want to play and I want to preload.
Yeah, that is a good one. Like I know that there's been a couple of games where I've done that for. One particular game I'm keeping my eye on is that new Stargate game from Slytherin. I'm such a huge fan of Stargate that there's probably a good chance that I'm just gonna purchase it outright whenever it comes out, or like whenever the buy button becomes available. Just like pre-order this now. Yeah.
Slytherin has an interesting habit of putting stuff on their store, on their website first, and holding it back from Steam for 3 months. And if you buy it on their store, you will get a Steam key when it comes out on Steam. But you basically have to do like an old school standalone installer and manually patch it for 3 months.
Interesting.
I ran into that with one of the War Plan games, I think it was, and oh gosh, I can't think of the name of it. It was like a post-apocalyptic strategy game, super in depth, and I can picture it. I just can't think of the name. It'll come to me. But anyway, they've done that a few times lately that I've noticed. I don't know if it's a policy or it just sort of happens that way, or it's like their version of early access, but they definitely do that from time to time. And so that's like a form of pre-order too, I suppose, right? You're buying it at full price from them directly. You're not paying 30%.
Yeah. Well, and I pre-ordered back in the day when SWTOR was in beta, and I got to play the beta. I actually pre-ordered the collector's edition and then canceled it because I just wasn't sure I was going to actually play the game long term moving forward. Well, years later, I actually did. I eventually got the base game, but years later, I found a sealed copy of the collector's edition on Amazon for like, I think it was like $80, and still had the key intact and everything, and I was able to actually apply the key to my account and unlock all the collector's edition stuff on my account. And then I also had all the physical stuff too, because it came with a Malgus statue and an art book and all that other stuff. And I like that kind of stuff. I like the gaming stuff. But it was just funny how like at one point I almost bought the pre-order for the collector's edition, and then I was just like, oh, well, I guess I can live without that one. And then years later I see it for $80, and I was like, $80 for this thing being out for as long. People aren't trying to gain any high value from it. They're
not scalping it.
Right. It was actually really cool. And I've actually, bought a few collector's editions that way of some games just because I found it for really cheap. I almost got the collector's edition for Titanfall 1, but after playing through it, I was so thankful that I didn't because of just how unfortunate that game was. But I've been considering trying to get my hands on a copy of the collector's edition now, just because that statue is so freaking cool. But they're like $300 and something. So
yeah, I was gonna say, I think the Coder one goes for 300-ish now for sealed. Version.
Well, and I missed the buck on the Wings of Liberty StarCraft 2 collector's edition. I didn't have the money to buy it at the time, so I wasn't able to get the collector's edition. But I did get Heart of the Swarm and Legacy of the Void collector's editions. And then years later, I found an unopened copy online of StarCraft 2 Wings of Liberty for a pretty decent price, and was able to finally get that. But it kind of makes you realize that if you don't pre-order some of these things now and you really want it later, you might be paying a heftier price for some of those things, which definitely kind of makes the pre-order stuff worthwhile, but only if it's going to add some kind of a tangible value more than just the game that you're probably going to digitally download anyway. So
I'm trying to remember. There was something I pre-ordered recently, a collector's edition, and they actually emailed me a key for it. So I got the physical stuff from the collector's edition, but the actual game came as a digital download. It was included, but that was kind of interesting. I'm trying to remember what it was now.
Well, was that from what's that site? What's the one that does like
the reselling?
Not the reselling of keys, but they do limited run games. Yeah,
it was not them. Oh no, maybe it was. Now that you say that. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. I mean, the point being, certainly the collector's editions are a bit of a gamble, right? Sometimes they're super cool, sometimes not so much. The Fallout 76 notoriously had a few issues with the quality of stuff included in.
Yeah, the not canvas bag or whatever it was. Yeah, that was. Yeah, that was pretty bad. That was a really unfortunate scenario, and I feel for a lot of people that went through that, because it was just like, this is why physical collector's editions can be rough. Most of the time, they're not too bad. Like, I've got the SWTOR one, I've got the 3 StarCraft ones, I got both Diablo 3 ones because the expansion. I've got like an EVE Online Second Decade Collector's Edition. Now that was really slick because that came with a model of one of the ships from the game as a USB hub, which was really cool. But even if you don't use it as a USB hub, it's just a cool ship to display.
Yeah.
And then it also came out, they also had a copy of one of CCP's like original games they did that was a board game before they made EVE.
Right.
And so that was kind of like, you can't really buy that anywhere. So that was a cool thing. And then of course I also got like Guild Wars 2's Collector's Edition. But this is during the time where like you could start getting them online, right? Like you could just digitally buy them from like Amazon or for the company directly. And you don't have to worry about some third party in the middle like company kind of screwing you over.
Yeah, well, I know I imported the Triangle Strategy Collector's Edition. I pre-ordered it from Amazon UK, and I ended up sending you the cart because I bought it digitally. And I've had that happen. That's actually where those PS4 games you got from me came from as well. Because I had already bought the game, but the Collector's Edition went up cheap on Amazon because they were clearing out the last ones that hadn't sold or had been, canceled orders or whatever. And it was for the PS4. It just happened that was the one that was cheap. So I bought it, but I have no interest in playing it on the PS4. I already own it on Xbox. So, stuff like that where there's some interesting economics at play. But the going back to the pre-orders for a second, I gotta say what will often have me pre-ordering is on console, it's being able to preload it. On PC, it's sometimes that as well. But on PC, I tend to get it from those third-party sites because I want to save some money. And I mentioned this a couple shows ago, but I've had them fail to notify me when the game finally comes out. And that really irks me because you can't even send me an email when I can go get my key. And you kind of have to mentally track. Like I've made a point now of keeping track of all of them, and I have them in Play Night in a tagged with a pre-order category. So when they you can go in IMDb and it'll have the release date. So I just do anything in the future. I tag with that date and then, or that category, and then I can quickly pull them all up. And as they get released, I just manually remove the category and remove the game. If it, gets pulled in through Steam, my manually created Play Night entry can go away. So that's like what I found I have to do on PC to keep track of pre-orders. Like at that point, I'd rather not even bother.
Right.
There's a lot of work, pain in the butt. But those third-party sites, a lot of times, only have the discount up until the game comes out or a couple weeks after the game comes out, because they only have a deal with the publisher for so many keys or for so long. So they will lose the ability to sell those games. So if you don't get it at least, fairly quickly, you could miss out on the big discount on it.
Right. I ran into an interesting thing the other day. I forget the game I was looking at, but I was looking for collector's editions of a specific game. And on the actual company's website, they were only selling digital collector's editions for the PC, and they had physical collector's editions for the PlayStation and Xbox. And they like came with all these cool things. And I was like, why? I don't understand what the point is here. Do you just think that PC players aren't interested in this stuff too? Like that's where I really kind of like got confused. Like why would a company do, like, where's the incentive there, to buy the PC collector's edition that was the same price as the other collector's editions, but I didn't get anything extra. I was like, that kind of seems rather
that's
unfortunate.
weird.
Yeah, so I forget the game. I'll have to look that up, but
I was going to say, I know one of the issues that game makers have doing the collector's editions that include the game is they have to predict, okay, we're going to make 5,000 or 10,000 of these collectors. How many should be PlayStation? How many should be Xbox? How many should be PC? Well, if they eliminate the PC, then they only have to, gauge between the two consoles, so it makes it easy for them, I suspect.
Mm-hmm.
I know, a few years back, it was like 50, 25, 20, 50% PlayStation, 25 Xbox, 25% PC were the multiplayer numbers, at least.
Mm-hmm.
So I could see where, they might only want to do Xbox and PlayStation for those, but because you're making them all ahead of time before the game comes out. You're just guessing essentially how many people are gonna want the collector's edition, which is why some of them are so rare.
Right.
Because if you didn't pre-order it, it's just gone forever. I remember the Mass Effect, Dead Space. The original Dead Space was one that was very, very valuable.
Yeah, see, I feel like instead of it being a pre-order thing for the game, the collector edition, whatever, and you get a statue, it's just like, no, just have a company store, and on the side, I could buy the statue, even if I don't buy the game or whatever, right? And that way, you don't have a bunch of BS editions sitting in like Best Buy on the shelf gathering dust 10 years later.
Yeah, well,
I don't know if you've ever seen that.
That was the that was the unfortunate. Yeah, I have seen that. That was the unfortunate thing with the Homeworld Remastered Collector's Edition that I almost got, where I wanted that Pride of Hagara like mothership statue, but to try and get it now, it's not worth the money. Like, and that's the thing that kind of frustrates me sometimes.
Yeah, and I think you're right, Alien Pickle, that if companies would have it as a separate thing, but I'm guessing, it's not worth it to them for some reason. I don't know. It's strange. I do remember id Software basically did that, where there was a collector's edition for the original Wolfenstein. For Wolfenstein, the remastered version, which was the sequel to Return to Castle Wolfenstein, confusingly. that one had a resin statue of the dog in the game, like robot dog thing that was super scary.
Yeah. You know what I would love to see is like the old Star Wars figures, where it was an action figure that was a set size, right? And then they'd have like vehicles that were compatible sized or whatever. So if there was a toy company that would license video game things, so then I could just get like Fallout action figures or Doom action figures or Tekken action figures, and they're all the same scale, right? So they'd go on the shelf with each other, right? And it's unfortunate, like the only people that seem to do that is like the Lego style things, where you get like minifigs of whatever, or the guys that do the vinyl stuff. I forget their name. The Pop.
Oh, Funko
whatever.
Pop.
The Funko Pop, and Nendroid is the other one.
Yeah. So if it was actually like, if instead of Funko Pop, goofy, ugly vinyl things,
right,
that it's like they're kind of all the same thing, painted a little different, mostly.
Then
but
you get NFTs, right?
Yeah. So what if Funko Pops were NFTs? Kill me. No, I'm just saying, like, if there was something else, right? Like some toy line that was just like, hey, we'll make any video game franchise that lets us, right? But they'll all be the same size and whatever figures. Or if there's like, like Command and Conquer, yeah, we'll make the tanks from that as like little Matchbox tanks or something, like Hot Wheels scale. Or whatever. Like, I feel there's a market out there. Like, if they made every unit in StarCraft 2 as some collectible Matchbox size thing, people would have bought them. So, and since we can't get movies anymore that are good enough to actually make toys from, then maybe they could pivot.
It's weird. Speaking of that, it's weird how that industry has kind of shifted to where we used to get games and like toys based off of like current movies or current whatever's out there, and like it feels like most of that stuff gets shoved into like Fortnite or you know.
There are exceptions. The guy who did Spawn, McFarlane, not Seth, the other one, I forget his first name.
Todd,
thank you. His toy company, I know, did action figures for Cyberpunk 2077. And I believe they've done a couple of other games. So there are
the McFarlane stuff is cool. I mean, they do a really excellent line of 40K stuff as well. I've got a Space Marine on my shelf.
I have a few of those too.
Yeah, and that's pretty dope. Although I would buy at just about any reasonable price a Spawn made by Seth MacFarlane. Like if you would let Seth MacFarlane take an animated crack at Spawn.
That's interesting.
Well, there was the HBO series.
Yeah, but I mean, like Family Guy.
Yeah.
As Spawn, right?
Right. That would be pretty wild.
Yeah, imagine Peter as Spawn.
Oh God, that needs to happen as like an episode of Family.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh no, we've confused the McFarlanes.
Oh my gosh, that's funny.
Yes,
they let the wrong McFarlane into the studio.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Anyway, hey, so how about when I was at the feed store the other day, I spotted that action figure for Donnie from New Kids on the Block hanging. I put that in the collectibles. I guess you guys didn't notice. That was a dank blast from the past. Still new in box. New Kids on the Block action figures.
I didn't realize you'd actually found it like right then. I remember seeing it, but
I was standing there. I took that picture. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's wild.
Yeah, that is wild. Well, I think this is a good like opportunity where we can pivot for a second and talk a little bit about like you've had. We've talked about pre-orders, and we pre-ordered the Steam Deck, both you and I. Your Steam Deck came in because the ordering process was interesting because even though I think we ordered ours on the same day, yours was earlier in the day, and thus you got in on the tail end of Q1, and I ordered later in the day, and it put me mid to late Q2.
I wonder if I pre-ordered right now if I would get the Steam Deck 2. Because they'll have several hardware revisions between now and...
Yeah. That's funny.
You are probably at least looking at 2023.
I was gonna say you're definitely next year if you order now. But so you've had about a week with yours. Now it's been a week with yours, full week.
Yep.
So like now that you've pre-ordered it and you've got it, like what do you think?
Okay, where to start?
Before you begin, we do have a whole channel dedicated to the Steam Deck on our Discord, so you can see all of Mellified's continued updates and links and modifications or whatever it is that he's doing to his deck. So come on over to our Discord to check that out. But tell us.
Okay, well, so I mean, it's big. It is physically large, and I'm not saying anything that hasn't been said already. I understand that, but when you get it, it is shockingly large. It feels almost like I have a 10 keyless keyboard on my desk, and it is almost as wide as that. If that helps you picture how wide we're talking. The weight is very good though. It's well balanced. Like you don't feel fatigue holding it, which is nice. The controls, I know some people, typical early manufacturing, there's been some issues with joysticks and some things, triggers. Mine's been great on that front. They just, to their credit, Valve has been extremely aggressive about pushing out updates. And there were 2 this week, mainly focused on keyboard improvements, but they also there were issues with certain USB docks, so they tweaked the firmware so that it would initialize the USB differently to help with that issue, apparently. So, I'm getting a little bit in the weeds, but Valve's been doing a really good job of keeping it updated. We mentioned on our news show earlier or last week that, we're up over 2,300 games, I think it is, that have been tested. and 2/3 of those are, playable or perfect by Valve's estimation. So that's a ton of games to choose from. I think I had 500 in my fairly big library that were ready to go.
Yeah, I just checked because there's actually a compatibility list you can go look up, and there's a lot of games that I have that are already compatible. Now, you've been doing a lot of tinkering with it, but how much gameplay? So how's the game? Like, have you been doing a lot of gameplay on it though too, or?
I played mostly Jupiter Hell on it, which is a turn-based roguelike Doom game, basically. And it was great. I don't have great eyes. I have glasses. Even though I'm allegedly corrected in 2020, I still feel like text tends to be small. I've avoided games that have the very small text warning from Valve on them because I feel like I just wouldn't even be able to read them. So outside of that concern, the stuff I've just dinked around with and then actually put some playing time in Jupiter Hell, it's been great. It just works. I mean, that's at least the verified games. You just turn them on and play. You don't have to think about it.
Now, if you had the option to play Switch games on this, would you rather play Switch games on here or on your Switch? Let's say Nintendo all of a sudden decided to sell their games through the Switch. Would you rather play them, or through the Steam Deck? Excuse me. Would you rather play them, here?
I think I would play it on the Steam Deck just because of the larger screen. It even the OLED Switch, which has the largest screen of any of the Switch models, is like an inch or so smaller than the screen on the deck. Because I think the OLED Switch is like 6 inches. The one you have is 5.5 inches. The OLED one is 6, and this is 7.
Nice.
So you're getting a bigger screen. It is a little bit different aspect ratio than the Switch, though. The Switch is 16:9, so it's 720p. The Steam Deck is 800, but it's 16:10.
Right.
If I'm just talking gibberish, I apologize for those. But basically, the Steam Deck screen is not as wide as the Switch screen. Slightly narrow.
So and that's interesting though, because I know that when you dock the Steam Deck, allegedly you should be able to get 4K resolution on a monitor. Apparently it can push a 4K image.
Sure. Yes.
Allegedly.
Yes. Yeah, well, I haven't tested it. To be fair, I haven't tried doing VGA or HDMI out or. But yes, I've seen people doing 4K desktops and things with it. But a Pi can do a 4K desktop. That's not
right.
That's not hard per se. Doing game graphics, updating 60 frames a second, 30 frames a second in 4K, different story.
Sure.
But the verified games automatically seem to tune the graphics for the deck. It detects it's on the deck and it has a preset for medium graphics or whatever, so it runs good on the Steam Deck. The games that are not tested yet, you can still install, but you're kind of on your own to figure out how to get them tuned to run well. So I did try Assassin's Creed Valhalla a little bit, and I had to crank it down substantially, which actually leads me to one of my complaints, interestingly. A lot of games do not distinguish between game settings and graphics settings when they do a cloud sync, which means my graphics settings from my desktop, which are running on a 3080 Ti at 4K, get pushed to the Steam Deck, which cannot do ultra graphic fidelity and cannot do some of those things. So I think game makers need to do a better job of sort of splitting that up, where the graphics settings are machine specific, but the game settings stuff are shared or are synced in the cloud. the deck, Steam has one of the better, cloud save implementations, right? So
Mm-hmm.
my save games are just there when I go on the deck. If I switch to the PC, I don't have to think about it for the most part. So that's been really good as long as I have internet, obviously, on the deck. What else? I have been less impressed with Linux mode on it. Because it's got two modes. It's got Steam OS is what's running on it, but Steam OS has Steam mode and desktop mode. And Steam mode is just like a Steam interface. It's like you're in this. Oh, I just hit Mike. Sorry. It's like you're in the Steam client permanently. You can't leave it. But in desktop mode, it's like Linux. You can run a browser. You can do all that stuff.
Wow, that's nuts.
And so it takes a minute to switch between. And up until the update this week, there was no software keyboard for desktop mode. So you had to have a physical keyboard to do anything in Linux mode. Now they've just added it, but you have to manually pop it up. It's like Steam and the X button, Steam button and the X to bring up the virtual keyboard. So there's a couple little goofy things like that. Obviously, like I say, they just fixed that one, but it is still Linux. It is still a PC. Underneath it all, if you kind of go any further than just, hey, I have this game that I have in my Steam library, deck certified, and I'm going to play it. If you want to do any more than that, you are going to have to get into like the Linux side of things, and that's where the wheels probably fall off for a lot of people because it is not user friendly, particularly.
So how's the emulation scene on it? Like, do you just go on Steam and then you install?
RetroArch is on Steam. You can install it on the deck, and it just works. I don't know that all of the cores have been optimized for the deck necessarily, but you can at least get the emulators running.
So it's not like I'm going to just sideload SNES 9X Linux onto it and trigger that out of Steam.
You could, but you don't have to, right? It's certainly much easier.
Well, how like Steam allows you to add non-Steam games. Yeah. So can I add a non-Steam executable?
Yep.
Into Steam?
I've done that, but you have to go into Linux, get the thing installed, and then add it as a third-party game to Steam.
Oh. Because I figured maybe if it was just on the SD card, then I just point to the SD card and say launch that.
But there's also the Dolphin emulator guys have also sent screenshots of Dolphin emulator working on the Steam Deck. So you just like with anything emulation, anything outside of like the Steam OS or Steam itself, it's a lot of manual processes.
It can be done though, absolutely,
yes.
And there are even tools. There's a tool called Steam ROM Manager, I think, where it goes through, scans all your ROMs, downloads all the artwork, and injects them all as third-party games in Steam. Turns out you can break your Steam client doing that because you can overload the database with too many games in it. But there is a scene is certainly developing around using Steam Deck for emulation, and it is still very young, because the Steam Deck is so new, but it's built on, the existing sort of emulation options. Emulation Station is the front end for RetroArch, for example. There is a Steam Deck specific like port of that a lot of people are really liking. I know you can do like Yuzu, you just sideload Yuzu, or I shouldn't say a sideload because it's not. You can go into Linux, download Yuzu, and add it and play all your Switch games that way. So there are definitely plenty of options. What actually my project for today is to get my NAS drive with all my ROMs shared to the Steam Deck so that I don't have to put all of my ROMs on the Steam Deck. I can just play them over the network. Because I don't want to take up space on my system with emulation stuff. So, I'm going to play around with that. But I've used Linux for 20 years, right? Like I don't mind getting if I have to. It's not maybe my preference, but I can certainly get in there and do stuff. I don't think most people are gonna want to do that, and there's a lot of bad tutorials online right now. I'm trying to think of how to say this without getting into super nerdery about Linux, but Valve chose to use a system in Linux where the operating you can unlock it, and if you do that, that's fine. But it's the next time your Steam Deck updates the OS, it's going to blow away everything you did because it's going to revert it back to the stock image. So you don't want to go in and do like the typical in Ubuntu, it's apt install or apt get, type stuff, because if you do that, it's going to be gone. There's a new thing called Flatpaks, which are Linux applications that come with all their dependencies built in. So it's a portable application you just drop in and run. Those work great. And then it has a built-in store called the Discovery Store that basically downloads stuff as Flatpaks and installs it and manages it, updates it and everything. So if you stick to that, you're in pretty decent shape, and you can get the Heroic launcher that lets you install your Epic Store and GOG Store games. You can get that Heroic launcher through the Discovery Store. You can get some of the emulators through the Discovery Store. So there is, and that's a Linux thing. It's not a Steam or Valve thing. So there are, some options that make it a little bit easier, but I just feel like the average user would want to stick to the Valve sort of curated experience and not get into that stuff, because it can get pretty hairy. Now, a year from now, 6 months from now, I suspect it'll be one click, right? And you install, you'll go and make my Steam Deck cool, and it will install 50 things and figure it all perfectly, and it'll just work, and you won't have to think about it. But we're not there yet. So,
well, nice. Well, you guys got any final thoughts on pre-orders and stuff like that, or what we've talked about today?
I really want, actually, I'm going to combine our topic. I really want to know if games are Steam Deck compatible before I buy them now. And with pre-orders, Valve hasn't had a chance to test them. The developer hasn't necessarily tested them, so you don't know. So you kind of have to, hope that it'll be Steam Deck compatible. Valve does seem to be testing new releases, pretty aggressively, but that's still after the games come out, not before. So.
Yeah, I wonder if they could actually have like a Steam Deck beta. It doesn't play on the PC, but if you have a deck, it's out for you. And then we force you, like, only the people with Steam Decks are going to test this on the Steam Deck kind of thing. So then we'll allow access to those people or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's some way, but I know the reverse is happening, where people are taking the Steam OS and putting it on other handheld devices that currently run Windows typically, so that they get the nice UI and sort of curated experience of the Steam Deck on their other devices. So that's kind of interesting. One big thing, though, is the Steam Deck is x86, right? Desktop type, laptop type processor. It's not an ARM processor that you get in a phone or a tablet. So that certainly limits a lot of the third party usage of it.
Interesting.
Anyway, so it's a fascinating space. I just love ding stuff. So I certainly am having fun with it from that perspective, but I look forward to bringing it into the house with me and playing, in the family room with my wife. I don't have a gaming laptop, so like this is my gaming laptop. I can take it with me if I'm going to be out of the house. And I had to go. My wife had something going on. I had to go with her for a couple hours, and so I brought it with me then. And I was having a good old time sitting in a waiting room.
Did you get any looks?
No, but there was not a big crowd, and nobody was paying a whole lot of attention to me.
Huh.
So
It's like, hey man, where'd you get that Sega Game Gear, huh?
Yeah, really. I was expecting somebody to actually, but it didn't happen.
Well, right on, guys. Well, I think that'll do it for this week's episode. Be sure to come over to our Discord and check out all of our Steam Deck chatter and our Steam Deck channel on discord.otherworlds.gg, plus all of our other conversations. We got rooms for movies and other games, and we try and do gaming sessions and hangouts and community nights, so discord.otherworlds.gg for all of that and more. And we will see you guys next week. This has been episode number 57.
Yeehaw!